Matt Lenihan Boxing Social in association with Empire Fight Store, Forged Irish Stout. We're here. It wouldn't be a big fight without Dan Rafael involved. Always love coming to the States and managing to get your opinion prior to these big fights. We're here, Cinco de Mayo, it's Canelo week. Canelo versus Jaime Munguia.
I'm wearing my Mexican green.
Yeah, you're doing it. You're fitting in with the theme for the week, Dan. Look, what a fight. We've spoke about this previously. I know you've touched on it with Lewis as well at our end, but it's here now. We are at fight week. Grand arrivals don't really tell us too much. They both came in, sort of did the thing. What are you expecting now the fight's drawing near to see this weekend, hand on heart?
Yeah, listen, I not to hype it up. I mean, I don't need to do that, but I mean, if you take a look at the types of fights that these two guys have made for all the years they've been doing this, you got to figure it's going to be an exciting fight for as long as it lasts, right? I mean, Munguia knows no other way than to be a pressure fighter and to throw a lot of punches and, frankly, take a lot of punches. Yeah. He's now in his second fight with Freddie Roach, who is an offensive-minded trainer. You hope he cleaned him up a little bit on defense also. And Canelo, we've seen the kind of fights he's been through the years that if a guy's going to come to him, like Munguia certainly will, he can make it an exciting fight also. He's really more of a natural counterpuncher. People don't really think about that with Canelo. I think sometimes they view him as like the cliche Mexican that's just going to be a brawler, but he's a much more intelligent fighter than that. But while he can do that, and he has done that, his more natural inclination, at least seems to me, having covered him for a very long time, is that he's very content to counterpunch. Yeah. And I'm sure he's going to try to do that all night long against Munguia, who's going to be right in his face.
It makes me laugh almost when people talk about Canelo, and a lot of the things get said is, he's not the same fighter than he was how many years ago. But I think it's the same with all fighters. You look at when Floyd gets to a certain age, they rely more on the defence rather than throwing a five-punch combination. They more work off the jab. Is it a case of he's just evolved as a fighter and that he's more mature in his mind to know what he's doing, that he knows that, look, he doesn't have to come out like a bull. He knows that he can have 2 rounds to take in what he needs to take in before really sort of breaking down his opponent?
I think that he has been a fighter that has done that, but I also think that he may not admit it, he may not even realize it, but you have to make some accommodations for age and for slowing down a little bit. So, look, Canelo's still a great fighter. He's still a pound-for-pound level guy, still an undisputed champ of the world, still one of the best fighters we've seen in a long, long time. He's the first ballot Hall of Famer. But you'd be a fool to say that he's as sharp and as great today as he was just a few years ago. That's just the natural evolution of human beings. You get to a certain level of being involved in these fights and the training and the wear and tear, and it's going to have an impact. Now, it's not like, he was once at 100%, now he's at, 20%. Yeah. If he was at 100% whenever you would identify his peak at, okay, so maybe he's like, 90%. I mean, still great, but there's been slight degradation. I think that's fair to say. Now, he didn't really show it against the Charlo fight that he had back last fall, partly because Charlo just wasn't interested in actually fighting in that particular fight. But it didn't look like the sharpest Canelo I have ever seen. Yeah. I mean, and again, you maybe have an off night, but I think that if you put over time and you look at the fights, whether it's the way he fought with Bivol or the third fight with Triple G, which is a real quiet kind of fight, whatever the fight is you want to examine, it's been a little bit less over the last couple of years.
Moving away from this, sort of one of the side narratives, especially from our side of the pond, I'm sure you've seen it, Oscar de la Hoya, Eddie Hearn, going back and forth yet again. I mean, this sort of comes out of nowhere for me because, when you see these, like I say, beefs, these back and forths, we normally see it stem from something, whereas I feel like Oscar and Eddie were together all week, didn't see no animosity. I spoke to Eddie and said in private, and he says, nah, couldn't be nicer. He says, we're having dinner together, sat face off, nothing. Then he goes, I get home, and I see him trolling me on the internet saying this, that, and the other. He says, I'm a bit worried. He sort of jokingly said about the whole restraining order kind of things. Eddie doing Eddie. But what do you make of this? Is this just Oscar having fun, or does he actually have this intent? What do you think?
I think he just Oscar gets in a mood. Like sometimes Eddie gets in a mood. Sometimes any promoter gets in a mood, and they just decide to have their say. Look, they're promoters, right? They know how to stir things up. I mean, don't mistake that. Oscar De La Hoya was a championship-level superstar, megastar boxer doing pay-per-view promotions for a long time. He knows how to build things up and to cut through and make a point and get his opinions out. And he understands that people are going to hang on what he says, and he wants to stir things up a little bit, make it interesting. And certainly Eddie may not have been at that level as a fighter, but he's been around the promotion game his whole life with his dad and now his own situation as who runs the company. So, look, they're both good at what they do, and if it causes them to have a little back and forth, what's the harm there? Then they're not going to fight each other, obviously, but they can advocate for their guys, and maybe it will lead to. Look, they're both on DAZN, right? Maybe someday we'll see a 5-on-5 of Golden Boy versus of Matchroom. That'd be fun, right?
I was just about to say, how much fun is that if we can do something like that? Even get the PBC involved as well and get everybody involved.
One company at a time, but yeah, you can definitely. You went down the rosters and find the different fights that make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think you could have some fun with that, and certainly, for all the shit that Frank and Eddie can talk with each other, you don't think that Oscar and Eddie can talk shit like that too? Of course they could.
Moving away, Mike Tyson, Jake Paul, been confirmed. I almost say it with a smile on my face. And
they should turn the camera on and watch you just went with you shook your arm.
Because we go from talking about, and this is no disrespect, like everyone will be there to cover it. But when you look at Canelo and Munguia, and we're talking about pound for pound, Cinco de Mayo, Hombre vs. Hombre, Mexico weekend, big fight. This has now been sanctioned officially as a professional fight, which will go on their records. There was a lot of wondering in the build-up, is there going to be head guards, 16 ounces? Apparently not. I think, I can't remember what ounce they said the gloves are, was it 14 or something? But anyway, 2 minutes, professional fight. Just give me your honest thoughts on it.
I'm torn because I get why people want to see it because it's kind of crazy, but it depresses me because
sad.
I don't know about sad, but look, Jake is still a novice professional, but he's a young, prime, strong man at 27 years old who clearly, whatever you think of his boxing ability, he definitely has good punching power, especially with his right hand. Mike Tyson is an iconic legend. But I don't forget, when the fight was made and I was writing about it, I went back in my own archive of what I wrote about him because I covered Tyson at the end of his active career in the early 2000s. Covered a bunch of those fights. And I went back and I read some of what I wrote about him at the time. When you watch him against McBride, when you watch him against Danny Williams, when you watch him against Lennox Lewis, I can't even really count the Etienne fight because he just laid down. But I'm just making the point that Lou Savarese, like fights like that I was writing about, he was totally done and shot in 2001 and 2. But here's more of the point. Besides his performance in the ring, which was non-existent for those fights, basically, other than to take a beating by Lennox Lewis, I can remember vivid interviews sitting with Tyson as close as you and I are sitting now in the aftermath of the McBride fight. I had like a 35-minute private audience with Mike after that fight. And I was like the bartender or the psychiatrist. And all he did was pour his heart out about it, how I don't have it anymore. I don't want to fight anymore. I'm done with this. I don't have it in me. I don't have the skills. I don't have the training desire. And he's not suddenly better now 19 years later. He's going to be 58 years old on fight night. It's just not normal. Now, what about those great clips where he's showing all of that great speed and power and explosiveness on the clips they put up on social media? Okay, wonderful. He can sum that up for 10 seconds, for 30 seconds. It's a whole different ballgame when you're there, even in a 2-minute round, with another man half your age with good punching power throwing punches back at you. We'll see.
Hopefully, whatever happens, it's a good, entertaining event. Everyone comes out the ring safe. I think that's what everyone's main concern is. I think when they talk about that fight.
I mean, the good thing is, you get the Katie Taylor and Serrano rematch.
Talk about that. How excited are you for that? What a fight that was for the first time around.
Yeah, no, that was tremendous. That's a real bona fide championship fight between two of the best women, not only of current boxing but in all-time boxing for women. Two future Hall of Famers for sure. And so that's a big deal. And also just from the standpoint of it being the very first boxing event that Netflix is involved in. That's a big deal. Now, it's not boxing like we think about boxing, like legitimate championship. I'm not talking about the women. I'm talking about the main event. Yeah. So there's going to be a whole different crowd watching that. But the diehards will check it out also. If the fight itself between Jake Paul and Tyson turns out to be halfway decent or even remotely entertaining, hopefully, and of course, I have no expectation other than that the women are going to put on a good show, and then whatever other else they decide to put on the card. That if it is a good, exciting, entertaining event that I'm sure it's going to do well for Netflix, that maybe they will try to do a little bit more in terms of the boxing space. Not necessarily that type of fight, but a real bona fide championship fight where they think it will move the needle. A Canelo fight or something.
Well, when you look at all the streaming services in space, I think we've got to say as well, remember Eddie Hearn years ago took a punt, really. He was on Sky Sports, it was a mega machine, like mega. You go everywhere, you see it. And he bounced over to DAZN, big budget. And now we're seeing, obviously, the likes of, obviously this weekend, the likes of Prime, and now Netflix getting involved, these streaming services. It's only good for the sport, putting all their eyes on it.
Oh, no doubt about it. So, if the one silver lining of Mike Tyson and Jake Paul being sanctioned as a real fight is that is going to be a boxing event that Netflix might get excited about to perhaps pursue other boxing events. I guess that's a good thing. The one thing also about that I was thinking about, and somebody that I know in the business mentioned this to me, and it kind of made sense. The fact that they made it a real official fight, even if they reduced the number of rounds from, made it an 8-rounder, which is generally what Jake has been fighting. I think he only had the 110-rounder against Tommy Fury. But more notably, the 2-minute rounds and the larger gloves. It lends itself to a stricter regulation than if it had been an exhibition, that the regulatory aspect is not as strict.
Yeah.
So with it being an official fight, the regulatory aspect of the match is much tighter in terms of what they have to do. So if there, again, a silver lining of it being an actual fight is there's more safeguards because of the regulatory agency that's going to oversee it that would not be as strong as if it was an exhibition in my mind.
100%. Look, I want to talk about His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh. Revealed about a week ago, if Deontay Wilder gets through, he wants to make Jared Anderson on that card with Terence Crawford, and that just list of unbelievable fights in the US. What do you make of saying that before he's even had the fight? Oh, look, if you win, this is the next fight.
Listen, first of all, even without that fight, it's already an awesome card. I mean, that's not just kissing ass. That's the legit, real deal. That's one of the best cards in the last, 25, 30 years. You got to go, I've said this a million times, to find the card that deep, top to bottom, as interesting and as 50-50-ish kind of fights, you really have to go back to a number of the heyday mid-90s pay-per-view events that Don King did with Mike Tyson, with Julio Cesar Chavez. There was a ton of those types of shows. This card on August 3rd is a tremendous fight. A tremendous card overall. If they can add Jared Anderson against Deontay Wilder, it just adds depth to it even more. Whether it will happen, look, it's only 8 weeks after he fights against Zhang. Not an easy fight. Certainly anything can happen. He could get knocked out. But you know what? If Deontay could knock him out in the first round and come out with no injuries and be perfectly fine. So when Turki announced that, put the photo of himself and Jared on his social media, I had the occasion later that day to speak to Shelley Finkel, who was the Deontay Wilder's longtime manager. And I said, is this Turki's wish or is this like real? He said, listen, we're focused on June 1st.
Yep.
If everything goes how we think it will, which obviously means that Deontay is the win, and there's no injuries, that fight probably will happen. And I asked him, I said, so he'll have been through a full camp to get ready for Zhang.
Yeah.
He basically said, take 2 weeks off and go back for a shorter camp because they'll still be in shape. So their viewpoint is, yes, absolutely, if we come out of the fight with the win and no injuries, no reason why that fight won't happen. But you got to make sure there's no injuries and you got to win the fight.
It also lends itself to Anthony Joshua's comments because he came out and said, look, I'm going to be fighting either the winner of Wilder and Zhang, depending on how the fight goes, or Hrgovic Dubois. So then that basically leads us to saying, look, he's definitely fighting Hrgovic Dubois, and obviously after Fury Usyk, one of the belts comes vacant. He then fights for it.
I mean, if he fights the winner of Dubois against Hrgovic, it will be for the vacant IBF title.
Yeah.
I mean, in the contracts that Fury and Usyk have, it stipulates that they have to vacate by the certain date prior to June 1st. So there's no doubt that the winner of that fight between those two guys is going to be for that vacant title. What plays out after that, really, nobody really knows. It's going to be up to Turki to decide because he's got the money. And if he wants to see the fight, he can pay for the fight, and the people will take the fight. So, from that standpoint, he's like the conscience of the boxing fan, doing the fights that a lot of us want to see. Even if Jared Anderson and Deontay is not a fight that you and I were sitting here clamoring for, when you see that, you're like, oh shit, that's a good fight. Well, I'll take that fight any day of the week.
Boxing, I feel like the last 18 months, it's been a bit like Disneyland. When you look at Crawford Spence happening, Gervonta Davis, Ryan Garcia, Haney this, that, Canelo's. I feel like we're entering into a really good age again. Are you on the same?
I'm not willing to go that far because I don't know how long this Saudi thing will last. Because it could, if they change their mind or they have a different viewpoint or they decide to do something else, it can end in a heartbeat. I still think there's a lot of underlying issues with boxing in terms of you don't have enough dedicated broadcasters with real budgets, which is why I'm very happy to see Netflix doing this because they're spending a shitload of money to do Mike Tyson and Jake Paul and the women's fight on that same show. But right now, the big fights that are going on that are happening with the Saudis, that's they can put up whatever they want, but they're not doing it the way a regular promoter would be doing it, which is they need to run like the profit and loss and what's our return on this event, and they've got to keep the purses to a certain amount to make sure that they can afford to do the show. With the Saudis, the money is no object, and if that no longer is there, who's going to pick up that slack. So I don't begrudge any fighter for getting that huge big money. God bless them. But it's in the long term, it's not the way you can have a sport survive at the top level.
Last one from me, Floyd Mayweather, Gervonta Davis. I mean, we see a lot of things in promotions to the fights, but this back and forth over X and Twitter, I don't know whether I look at it and think, do I buy into this?
It's real.
But then I look and think, Gervonta's done it in the past where he uploads, deletes, uploads, but is this him gone now? Is he like, nah, end of my tether, I'm just going to say what I want and sort of stick with it, because you believe this is 100% authentic, there's no anything else underlying?
My understanding, he's not with Mayweather Promotions. He's still close to Leonard Ellerby, who is the CEO of Mayweather Promotions, but when he fights, you don't see Mayweather Promotions, but they bring Leonard in to serve as his person, his face, if you will, to run his side of things, because they've had a long-standing relationship. But there's been a lot of issues between Floyd and Gervonta. And look, it's the worst kept secret in the world, in the history of boxing. Gervonta Davis slept with Floyd's daughter. That's caused problems. That's been the issue for a long time. Period.
Yeah. Wow. Well, let's leave it there. Dan Rafael, appreciate.
That's one way to leave it, right?
I mean, yeah, I wasn't expecting that line, but look.
But that's the truth. I mean, I'm not talking out of turn. That's like the worst kept secret ever. Yeah. It's common knowledge that caused a fracture in that relationship. Yeah. I can understand where Floyd would be coming from as the parent, and Gervonta's like, look, it is what it is. So. That's between them.
Well, let's see how this sort of unravels and plays out. Look, we're looking forward to this weekend. It's Cinco de Mayo. Dan Rafael, as always, appreciate your time. Thanks for giving me 16 minutes of your time. I really appreciate it. We'll catch up soon, hopefully.
You bet. Thank you.